Welcome to this episode of Mindful Medicine. I'm your host, Tracie Jones, and I'm here with Dr. Jim Schrenker. Today, we are going to talk about a deep topic. And Dr. Schrenker, I am going to let you lead this topic because this is new to me, and I'm sure our readers are going to really see, oh my goodness, this is very deep. But you've mentioned before about forgiveness and how forgiveness plays a big role in our health.
Right.
So I'm just going to give it to you. And how does forgiveness play a role in our health?
Well, I think the first thing to understand is let's define forgiveness. I think we're taught a version of forgiveness is sitting down at the Thanksgiving dinner and making friends with everybody there that you don't like and putting up with stuff that you don't want to put up with. And going on life with a smile on your face. That's forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't that. Forgiveness is very layered. The first thing to understand is that forgiveness does not require you to like the individual. Forgiveness is simply understanding that individual had certain things that they had to do in this lifetime between the contract of you and them. You're not going, let's back up a little bit. In my belief system, we incarnate on this earth plane to learn certain lessons. That's the purpose of human life, to be here to learn. And that learning process should draw us closer and closer to understanding unconditional love. You can't understand unconditional love unless you are the person that is perpetrating the offense, unless you are the person that is being offended, unless you're the mother of both, the father of both, the sibling of both. In other words, one simple offense would require multiple incarnations on your part to be able to understand it completely, right? You can't look at a situation from just the front side. You have to look at the situation from the front, from the side, from an oblique angle, from behind, in order to assess what you're actually looking at. So in my belief system, I believe in reincarnation. I believe that we come down here multiple hundred, thousands, millions of times. I don't know. But in our incarnations, there is something that is consistent, and that is usually your group that you incarnate with. If I'm here to learn forgiveness, I'm not going to assign that task to you because you're just in my life for a second. I'm going to assign that task to a wife, to a child, to somebody that breaks into my house and does something that I don't want done to me. I'm going to assign that task to somebody that can do the job. And that's their job, is to do whatever it was that was done in order to provide you with a better understanding of what unconditional love is. So forgiveness is just understanding that what happened to you was something in a contract somewhere that somebody fulfilled. Doesn't mean you aren't hurt. Doesn't mean that you don't have PTSD from it. It doesn't mean any of that. It just is simply a different understanding. You can forgive people that are dead. You can forgive people that are alive. They aren't what the object of forgiveness is. The object of forgiveness is within you. And it's understanding that you are love, that they, at their core, are love. What they did was not nice. What they did offended you. But if we look at it from a different context, that, you know what, that had to happen. Thank you for doing that. Now I can move on. I can learn to forgive you. I can learn forgiveness. I can learn to move on. I can learn healing. So one of the analogies that I use is if I'm stepping on your toe, you can say what you want, but you're not going to forgive me because I'm still stepping on your toe. You have to withdraw your foot so I don't step on your toe anymore. You have to do actions to withdraw yourself from that situation. So just because you're born to a certain set of parents doesn't mean you got to like them. Doesn't mean you got to accept what they do. This was your circumstances that you chose to be born into. I chose these parents because they're going to give me the set of lessons that I need in order to learn my end goal in this life. Well, who would choose parents that are drug addicts? Well, who would choose parents that leave you? Who would choose parents that abuse you? And again, it gets into a very deep and touchy subject, but if you understand that they're there to teach you a set of lessons and you're there to learn those lessons, why would you ever let somebody that's not directly tied to you teach you those lessons? You know, I can get rid of you or anybody else in my life, turn my back, move, go away, no big deal. You can't get rid of a sibling. You can't get rid of a mom or a dad or somebody that's related to you. They're always going to be there because they've imprinted upon you. So in a somewhat of a superficial way, we need to accept that what has happened has been in divine order, in divine time, even though we may not understand it, and even though the act may not be divine in and of itself. But that is at least a starting point, because what you see is you see people that blame other people for their lives. You see people that blame them. Oh, I would have been something if it wasn't for them, or I would have done this, but look what she did to me. Oh, look what he did to me. You were the one it was done to. You are the one that has to forgive. You are the one that has to move on. They may not even remember it. You know, how many times have you been upset over a situation, come to find out that the other person doesn't even remember the situation? And you're like, oh,
true.
You know? So the great thing about forgiveness is it doesn't require the other person to accept it. They don't have to accept it. They may think what they did was perfectly well and perfectly right. And at some level, they're probably right. It may not have been socially acceptable. It may have been damaging. But on that spiritual basis, if they're here following their highest path to get you on your highest path, then sometimes it can be painful.
Wow. Well, what happens in the body if somebody is choosing not to forgive?
Well, choosing not to forgive is another form of anger. It's resentment. But it also can bring about shame and guilt. If you look at somebody that has perpetrated their free will on another individual, abuse, rape, something like that, there's a degree of shame and guilt in the person that was affected. And that shame and guilt is simply the displacement of love. How do you forgive somebody that does something like that? It's hard. But you got to work with it within the principles that I outlined before. You have to get counseling, maybe. You have to get some help, just if somebody there just to listen. But when you have that displacement of love, if we truly are made in the image and presence of infinite mind, prime creator, source of all that is, then we are infinite mind, prime creator, source of all that is. No room in this physical body for hate, shame, guilt, resentment. There's just no room, because it will increase your blood pressure. It'll cause ulcers. It'll cause cancers. It'll cause heart disease. It'll cause diabetes. It causes any known acquired human disease. You'll see more disease in depressed people, more disease in people that are filled with anger than you will with somebody that's not. We know that in medicine. That's not alternative or holistic. That's written in conventional papers. So forgiveness allows room for love. Forgiveness kind of compartmentalizes that anger and shame into a smaller box that you might be able to get rid of more easily than if you're just consumed with it throughout your whole life and your whole body.
So I guess one thing about forgiveness is when you decide to forgive. Like you said, you're not saying that what the other person did was right.
Right.
You're not condoning it. But you're just saying, you know what, this happened, and I choose to no longer focus on this and let my mind stay on that, and
Right.
then affect my physical and emotional state,
Right.
and probably spiritual state as well.
Right.
And so I choose to let that go.
Right.
And I'm going to redirect my thoughts, my life, my physical and emotional being on good.
Perfect. I love the use of the word choose, because it is your choice. You can choose to hang on, and you can choose to be bitter, or you could choose to let go. I mean, and that even goes right along with grief. I mean, you lose a parent, you lose a child. You know, are you going to hold on to that? Are you going to hold on to that void, or are you going to honor that person? So allowing that to go, choosing love over those negative emotions is absolutely the hallmark of healing.
That makes sense. I remember when my dad passed away, I was angry.
Mm-hmm.
I probably didn't grieve for a full year.
Mm-hmm.
I was mad because he died.
Mm-hmm.
Because he didn't listen.
Right.
If he would have just listened, this wouldn't have happened. But it was his time.
Mm-hmm.
It was his path. But I didn't want to accept that. And I remember it was about a year later, finally shedding tears.
Right.
And letting that go, and going to his graveside and saying, Dad, I forgive you. I've been so angry at you for dying, but I know you're in a better place, and I know you're probably smiling on me and happy for me, and what a release of emotions, and not even realizing how much you're just carrying on your shoulders, because you've just kind of tucked that in, and to finally let that go. And I guess you see that all the time in your practice with people that finally are able to let go.
Yeah, there's that brings to mind a book called The Shack, and they got a movie with The Shack, and the premise of that is the main character is abused as a child, and his father's an evil, horrible individual. Father dies. Fast forward 10, 15 years. And the child is there, and there's a parade of energies, people that have passed coming through this valley. And excuse me. The one energy that is the most bounding and the most beautiful and everything else is his father. And he's talking to God in this movie, and roughly makes the comment, "Who's that?" "Well, that's your father." And it's like, well, he's beautiful. It's like, he always was beautiful. He just did horrible things, you know? And maybe it was his childhood that caused him to do what he did to you. So again, looking at it in a different circumstance, that this guy didn't want to beat his child up, and this guy beat himself up just as much emotionally after he would do it, but he couldn't stop. Yet when the father passed on the other life, he was this beautiful, radiant energy, this being of God that we all are. And the son was allowed to go, oh, so he wasn't an asshole, you know? So that was the healing process for him, to realize that, man, you know, it did happen, but dad had some things going on. And again, I'm not condoning anything that the father did, but get the book. The book's amazing. The show's good. And you'll see some aspects of forgiveness in that book and that show that has really shaped my life, obviously. Very powerful when you're able to transcend that hate and that guilt and that shame and trade it for love. It's just transformative.
Wow. As our closing here, if you could give our listeners one small piece of advice, one thing that they could start to do to forgive and let go, what would that be?
Picture the person, the object of your forgiveness. Picture them. Surround them with the white light of God. Beautiful halo. Surround them with that every second of the day. Every time you go to argue with them, every time you go to think of them, every time that they bother you, surround them with the white light of God. It's not up to us to judge. It's not up to us to know what's going on. The universe will take care of that. All we want to do is to make sure that they learn their lesson as much as you're learning your lesson. And the best way to teach them a lesson is surround them with that white light that they can use if they want. It's their choice. I mean, aren't human beings the most powerful creature in the universe? If we can either allow or disallow Creator in our life, I mean, the person that created everything, oh no, I choose not to do that today. That's pretty powerful. So surround them with that. And if they choose to accept it, it's going to be there. But do that repeatedly. Forgiveness is not a single event. It is a lifelong process. The most important thing right now is to become functional. Can I get rid of the day-to-day anger and things that are really poisoning my life? And then from there, you work on the nuances of all this stuff. But that exercise for me is what I use for anybody that upsets me or anything else at all. That's what I do. And then I forget it, I move it on, I give it to the universe to take care of.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. And thank you for watching today's episode. And remember, you are loved.